So at this point, if you still want to use JavaScript in your WebDev application, I'm going to try to help you do it. But we said all the things that we are going to say about why you shouldn't do it. So, how to? First, you have to define the problem. What do you want to do? By example, you want to get the width of the browser window for whatever reason. By example, you want to calculate where is the center of the browser window in order to position a cell at that position there. By example, that's really there are many cases. So once you've defined the problem, Google it, and you Google it with, in that case, browser width and JS for JavaScript. And if you do that, you will get lots of answers. Now, if you call me to ask me how to do that in JavaScript, well, let me Google that for you. I will do the exact same thing. So I do not pretend to know JavaScript. I just know how to make my way around it and find some solution when I really have to, and I don't like it. So please refrain if you can. Once you have your Google results of find the browser, and we're going to do that immediately so that you can see yourself. So we are going to do browser with JavaScript. And there you go, how to get browser width using JavaScript, how to get web page size, browser window screen size, get the browser viewport dimension width, and so on and so forth. So you go on the corresponding thing, and you get that. And look what they say. I found this function, but it failed if the body has width 100%. Isn't that great? And so on and so forth. And look at that function get width. Oh, that looks great. You need all that to get the width. No, you also have function get height. Self. Look at that. That is an example of code directly for several browsers. So look how it's done. If self.innerHeight, then the result is self.innerWidth. What they are doing, they are testing if this is working, if this is something that works for the current browser. If it is working, it means that you're on a browser that knows what self.innerWidth is, and you can return that as the value. Else, if now we are testing for another browser, if document.documentElement and document.documentElement.something, then it is working for that. This is the code for that browser to get the width. Else, if document body returns something which is only for some browser, and I don't know which one, then we use document body client width. So as you can see, you have here just 3 different syntaxes to get the width of your browser. So you need to get that looks promising and put that inside your application. So let's see if we can do that. We are going to try to now do that directly in WebDev. Let's copy this code. Now we go in WebDev. We create a local procedure browser side. We just have one empty page for now. So we create a new browser procedure. We call it get width, as it was the name that was given in the other, but you could call it anything you want, of course. We go in there, and there we are in a W language procedure. It's written there. But if you just click on the WL, you get a JavaScript function instead. Now, if you click back to WL and back to JavaScript and back to WL, you have one of these wonderful cases where the guy who was working on the WL-JS switch and the guy who was working on the commands did not talk to each other, with the result of having the command being created again and again and again. So you just forget about that. You do this and you replace that code with the full function. If you had found only one line, then you would put that inside the function. In that case, we are just copying that in here. Saving. You can see that even in JavaScript we have some information given by WebDev. By example, this is recognized as being a function of JavaScript. Now this is not, and this is not. So we have some information, but unfortunately not a lot, and it is definitely not as powerful as when you work in W language. Now the next step is, okay, we have our thing. Do we need to change something? Get_with is the proper name. Do we need to clean something? Well, I would like to change the name of this variable clearly, but for now I'm just going to test, see if I need to spend any more time on that. And for that I'm just going to create a button. Could be a link too, of course, and it could be called directly from the page opening code and so on and so forth. In that button I'm going to call it get_with. I'm going to write get_with. This will remember what I'm doing in here. This is going to call some JavaScript code, so it's on the browser side. We don't want to send anything to the server, so we're not doing anything here. We're saving that and going in the code. At that point we are going into the browser code, and you can see here that we are in a WL mode. At that point too, you could directly type JavaScript here, but I decided to create a function and call it. So here I'm just going to call get_with and display it. That's all. And I'm going to test. So let's test this thing. We are in Internet Explorer, and the width is, oh, it looks like it's returning something. If we change that, it's returning something else. So it looks like it is working. Now let's try to do that in another browser, because the problem is this code working in all browsers or not? Okay, so we go in the project, test browser, I change to Firefox. Test again. We are in Firefox, and it is returning to something. Is it changing also? Yes, it is. Isn't that great? So our code is working both in Firefox and Internet Explorer. And let's see if we test in Google Chrome, which is the third browser that I have installed on this machine, and we test, and we have a value 2. Isn't that fantastic? So we found on the first try the proper code for that function. Now I just tested with Safari, Internet Explorer and Chrome, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work on Android, on any browser on an Android machine, that is going to work on Safari, that is going to work on anything else. It just means that it's working with these versions of this browser in this environment under Windows. The same browser under Linux or Mac may behave differently. So this is one code, and I took this one and not this one. This one, the guy was already saying that it was not working. This one was saying use jQuery. Why? Because jQuery is already managing everything for all the browser, but we cannot do that directly. This one looked clean. It has at least 3 different browser syntaxes in it, and you have the get height in also that you can use at that point. and then a shorter version of the other. So, as you can see, you can find this kind of thing. And look at that. That's something else. Is it working? Is it not working? Is it working all the time? No idea. You have to test. So as you can see, this was extremely easy. I found the solution in about 5 minutes. Now the problem, once you've created the procedure and copy, clean the code, adapt the code and all that, most of the time it doesn't work. Because most of the time you find some code that is not working either in your environment, your browser, or not working at all. So you have to find another one. It doesn't work. And you have to find another one, and it doesn't work, and so on and so forth. So after some times, you arrive at something like what I've just displayed. Now this is clearly one of the simplest things to do. It's very basic, there's no parameter, and so on and so forth. So this is very a beginner example. And really, you will get back and forth before you find something that works for you. Now the problem is, this code is working here in my button. Will it work if I do it in the page load code? I don't know. Maybe at that time, and maybe it's not because the code is faulty. Maybe it's because when the page is loading, the system doesn't have yet the information about the browser width. It is perfectly possible. I've seen things like that. So if the information is not available while the thing is loading, you have no way of knowing it in advance. You are not a specialist in JavaScript. Perhaps it's a well-known fact that on this browser or that browser or all browser, while loading, the width information is not available. You cannot be sure. So why is it not working when it's when you have this kind of problem? Because your example is for another browser. So it doesn't work because it doesn't work in your mode, in AWP mode, in the classic mode. It doesn't work. Why? Well, because these things are already doing lots of things behind the scene. So is there a conflict somewhere? It's perfectly possible. It doesn't work in a cell. You can have something that just, by example, don't work in Firefox when you have a cell over a window and you try to do something inside that cell. In some cases it doesn't work because, well, maybe because that browser has a tendency to open something else at a lower level and it's hidden, or this or that. There are many different cases. Or it doesn't work in an iframe. All that are things that happen to me. So this is really the kind of thing that you're going to be confronted to all the time. And the list is, of course, absolutely not exhaustive. We are now going to look at some examples. This example are, in fact, my personal collection of JavaScript procedures. Which means that these are real procedures that I've been using and using them in different sites that I've been creating in the last few years. But I put absolutely no warranty whatsoever on these functions. Not one bit, nothing. This function may not work for you. This function may not work for you because you are in AWP or not in AWP, and they were made for a case that was in the other case. So, because just of many different things, the function may not work for you. It may be the WebDev version. It may be the browser version. It can be also a voodoo curse. It's perfectly possible at that point. With JavaScript, everything is possible. Now, the only thing I can tell you is that at some point, in some cases, each procedure was working. And that's about the amount of warranty I can give you on that particular subject. In fact, each time I am using one of my procedure for my collection, I am basically starting by laying a pentacle around the computer and starting to dance and all these kind of things. So it's really not something that you want to take lightly. Now, if you really decided to develop something using JavaScript and you develop some procedure and so on and so forth and you use that code, Don't hesitate to send me your updates, correction or addition to this collection. If you find that something is working better this way or that way, and you become a guru in using JavaScript in WebDev, do not hesitate to contribute if you want. I will in that case include them in the next version, and anybody who either who has already bought the course will be able to get it by just downloading the new version. So of course your name will be included in the procedure as the contributor, corrector, author, whatever it is that you are in that case. So if you really want to go that way, you can help. Now we're going to have a look in the code. If we go back to our example project, by the way, this example is just called JS, like JavaScript, and we have a look at the local procedure that we just created to get the width of the browser. So this is the code that I found on the web, and that we just pasted it, and that's it. Now we have in there, as I was saying, a collection of browser procedure called JavaScript functions. That's my collection. And in this we do have all these procedures are prefixed JS, so that I know immediately by the name when it's called somewhere that inside is JavaScript. That's just another example of how the name of the variable and the function help you code. So if we look at that list, there is one in there that does get browser height, and there's another one that get browser width, and I've already opened that one. So the get browser width does the exact same thing than the other one. It returns the width of the browser window. And this is the code that I had previously compared to that. As you can see, the code is extremely different. It's on one line instead of all that, with seemingly no test. So if we have a closer look at the code itself, what does it do? It does something with this vertical bar, and my understanding of JavaScript, and I am by no means a specialist in JavaScript, is that in a case like that, you're supposed to code that in a way that only one of these value is different than null, and the value that is different than null is going to be returned in the variable. So that's basically the same thing than all this if, else if, and return. And if we look at what we have inside, here we are trying to return the property inner width of the window. Here it's inner width of self, which basically is the same. Here we're trying to return client width of the document element of the document, which is what we are doing here. And here we are trying to return client width of body of document, and that's exactly what we are trying to do here. So basically I found at two different times two different functions on the web using the exact same methodology, but with a coding that is extremely different, and both are going to work most of the time from what I've seen. So why are we doing that? Let's go a little deeper into the detail, and I'm going to take this function because I find that it's clearer presented that way. Just for explanation purpose. I was telling you that in JavaScript each browser has a different implementation of well, most of functions are the same, but at the level of the document, at the level of the browser, the description of the browser element is completely different from one browser to the next. In one of them you have the window keyword here, and if you use the window keyword in the wrong browser, it doesn't mean anything for the browser. It doesn't know what window is. In the second browser, you need to use document instead. So the main level of the browser in one is called window, in the other is called document. So that's already it's about the same thing. If you had in your Windows, you were saying my window on one side and my page on the other. Yeah, except that we're doing that in WinDev and WebDev. But if you are doing that both in WinDev, different version of WinDev, you would have some kind of problem. Now that's the difference between this one and the other two. The other two are both using document. But if you look at what's happening after that, inside the document, the second browser, and I don't know which one it is, the second browser is using document element, while the third browser is using body. So these two have use the same name for the top level of the browser, but for the sub element that is working with the width of the browser, they're using different names. So we have here the example of three different browsers, and I'm guessing that one is Internet Explorer, the second is probably the WebKit engine that is used by both Firefox, Chrome, and a few other, and the third one is anybody's guess. It may be Opera, it may be I don't know what Opera is using, or it may be Safari. I really don't know. So as you can see, that's why it's extremely complex to code in JavaScript, because just to make sure, here it's going to work with presumably three different families of browsers. Which ones and which version, and that's anybody's guess, or yeah, I'm guessing a JavaScript guru guess, but it's certainly not me that I'm going to be able to answer that. So we have the same thing, of course, for the height of the browser. What else do we have? We can get the browser left scroll value, and you can see that here I only have the code for document body, which means that if you compare here, I only have the code for that family of browser, which means that this specific code will work probably only on one family of browser, and you will have to complete it for the other browsers if you are in that case. Why I didn't complete it? Because at the time I created that specific function, I needed it for one specific problem, and I don't spend any more time than I have to do on this kind of thing. If I have to find some code that is working for browser X version Y, I'm going to find a code that works for that. If incidentally it's working for something else, it's all well and good, but I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel each time. After that, you have some other code to do things that were not doable in WebDev, and I'm saying were. By example, you have gray CHX. So this was something that allowed me to directly in browser code gray or ungray a checkbox easily. As you can see, once again, this is using the document keyword, which means that at least in one type of browser it won't work. That's for sure. Now, what we are doing here is, and that clearly is some code that is not going to work. That is some test code, because here I'm passing an alias and I'm not using it afterwards. So you can forget about that one directly. But why am I keeping it inside my my collection? Well, just because I already did a lot of research to arrive at that level of information, and next time I need to do this kind of thing, I want to be able to restart from there. So I'm even though it's not complete, even though it's not working, I'm keeping it there. Yeah, I'm at that level of not knowing what I'm doing, absolutely. Here, this is to gray one field. and you can see here there is a parameter, just the same way than it is in the W language procedure. The difference is that in JavaScript the code is case sensitive. So if here you declare your parameter this way, you have to type it the exact same way here or it won't work. Now you can see here again it's working only against documents, so the one who's using window, probably this code won't work. Now we have a function called getElementById, and this thing is in fact returning the object, the variable, the field, the whatever in JavaScript that is that has this particular ID, and we are passing to that field the ID or alias of the field, and you can get that by the property field name dot alias. And after that, again, it's a property and it's equal true or false. When you read the JavaScript code by itself, it's not very complex. The problem is that this is different, that is different, this, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, you have a lot of different code. One that I use quite a lot is this one, because this one allows me to dynamically change the z index of a field. What is the z index? Well, it is information that tells the browser to display it in the background, in the foreground, or anywhere in between. So by just changing this z index, you can take one element and put it on top of another one, or below, or whatever you need to do. So it is extremely practical when you're working with different elements to be able to put it on top and then put it below, and so you can have some really nice effects. Here we have another function. We have the eval function, and the eval function is doing what? Well, basically it's the indirection that we have in the W language. It is creating an object name based on different string, and in that case, I found out by testing an error that for the z index to work, you needed to work on the dww element plus the alias. Don't ask me why. Once again, in order to answer this kind of question, you would have to go deep into the model of each browser and see how it works. So after that, it's style, z index, and the level. So again, no warranty. All this may or may not work with your browser, your version of WebDev, your different kind of voodoo curse, and so on and so forth.